point this morning. Let me describe for folks the approach that I intend to take with the hearing today. We have three issues that are listed under at the beginning, which relate to the revised draft plan, and two items from the spring fiscal letter. I'm going to take all of those items as one, and the approach that I'm going to use would be to ask the authority, High-Speed Rail Authority, to make a presentation. We'll hear from the Department of Finance, and then we'll hear from the Legislative Analyst's Office. Once we've had those formal presentations, I will take public comment, and we will be asking everyone to keep to 2 minutes each in public comment. Following that, we will have a discussion with the committee, and if the committee has questions at that point of the authority, Department of Finance or LAO, we'll have those folks come back up and answer those questions. The final item on our agenda today relates to the budget change proposals for High-Speed Rail Authority operations. As time permits, we will get to that item just for information and presentation at the end of the hearing. There is no action contemplated today by this committee. We are not expected to take and will not be taking any votes. The purpose of today's hearing is for information gathering, and that's how we will proceed. The Governor's Office, through the spring fiscal letter, has asked this committee and the full Budget Committee to take some consideration of the issues that are presented here prior to the June 15th budget adoption, and I anticipate that we will be having further hearings later in the spring as we move towards that June 15th deadline to have those kinds of considerations. And with that, then, let me invite Dan Richard, who is the chair of the High-Speed Rail Authority Board. And Dan, if there's others you want to bring to the table, please do. All right. Welcome, and if you would begin.
Chairman Gordon, members of this subcommittee, my name is Dan Richard. I am the chair of the California High-Speed Rail Authority. With me to my right is my colleague Michael Rossi, also appointed by Governor Brown to the High-Speed Rail Authority Board. We also have our team from Department of Finance, and as someone noted, the A-team from Department of Finance, which we appreciate this morning. Mr. Chairman, I would like to do this in a way that is most constructive for the committee. We can either answer questions that you have or give you a brief overview of the high-speed rail plan and the nature of the appropriation request.
Let me ask you to give a presentation.
Yes, sir. Members, we come before you today as part of the Governor's request for the upcoming fiscal year to actually begin capital expenditures for the commencement of the high-speed rail system in California. So we have reached a critical juncture where if the environmental clearance process completes itself and if the legislature agrees to appropriate the funds from the Bond Act in this budget cycle, we will be prepared to commence construction of California and America's first high-speed rail system by the end of this year. We have, over the last several months, in accordance with legislative direction and the direction of the Bond Act, prepared a business plan, which has been submitted to the legislature. Mr. Rossi and I have been intimately involved in the development of that plan. We also have staff expertise here from the High Speed Rail Authority to supplement any questions that we can't answer. Very quickly, I want to talk about the most recent revisions to the plan and what these mean. You will recall that in the fall, November 1st of 2011, the High Speed Rail Authority issued a draft business plan. And as I'm wont to say, its purpose was to elicit comments, suggestions, and criticisms, and it succeeded rather spectacularly in that. We received more than 250 comments from many people across California. We had input not only from this legislative body, but through your legislative peer review committee, LAO, the Bureau of State Audits, other experts inside and outside of California. And we have made several changes to the plan that are significant in their impact, but I do want to point out are really linear extensions of what was before you in November. First and foremost, the plan that you had before you in November contemplated an initial construction of 130 miles of track from roughly Madera to roughly Bakersfield. And at that point, that was going to be constructed with a combination of federal funds and state funds, and it had no electrification or positive train control, which was an issue that many people raised as a criticism. And the question that was mainly on people's lips was, what is the ultimate utility of that if that is all we could build because of any disruption in ongoing funding sources? Also in November, that was it. We had not planned to make any investments in the urban areas where there are many riders. In November, we talked about the so-called blended approach. And Mr. Chairman, you are one of the members of the legislature and a group of elected officials who had been urging the High Speed Rail Authority prior to Mr. Rossi and my appearance on the scene to look at a way to try to accommodate high-speed rail service in the San Francisco Peninsula area using existing tracks without having the either financial impact or environmental impact of an entirely new, discrete set of tracks. We embraced that notion in principle in November, but had not gone beyond that. And the other thing we did in November was we told you what we thought was the truth about the cost of high-speed rail. And we still believe those numbers were right. That was a little bit of a painful exercise because the numbers were large. I have to also say that one of the things that we feared would happen did happen, which is that people often mixed apples and oranges because we expressed the dollars not only in constant dollar 2010 dollar terms, but also in full year of expenditure, fully inflated dollars over the life of the project. So we got many comments on that. Mainly the cost is too high, the utility is not there for the initial construction segment, you're not really fully finding ways to utilize existing infrastructure, and why are we not making at least some investments in the urban areas so that if we run out of money or we're disrupted that we have something that is of value. What I would say to you members is we took those comments to heart. And the new business plan reflects changes that we believe not only address the comments per se, but also make it a more sensible and coherent approach. And I think we feel very good about the work product as we sit here today. So it has these elements. First, while we still commence construction in the valley, and I'm a Northern California resident, but I believe that is the right place to start for a variety of reasons. We now are looking not at an initial construction segment, but thanks to some other funding decisions that have been made, really talking about building an initial operating segment, starting in Madera and moving south through Bakersfield. The next piece would be to close the critical rail gap between Bakersfield and Palmdale, and then from Palmdale down into the San Fernando Valley, either to Sylmar or Burbank or someplace where people could connect to the Metrolink system into downtown LA as a first operating segment, first operating leg of high-speed rail. Let me emphasize, and we can talk about this in detail, when we say this would be an initial operating segment, we say to you with confidence that that segment, once built, would be able to generate revenues sufficient to maintain its operation and maintenance going forward. We are confident that there's enough ridership on that, and it would have a transformative effect because it would connect the Central Valley, which is our largest growing portion of the state, with the Los Angeles Basin, which is our most populous portion of the state. I'll come back in a moment to how we look at funding that, but that would be a fully electrified, operating, high-speed rail system with trains capable of exceeding 200 miles an hour, operating without a public subsidy, and it would be the first operating leg of high-speed rail. At the same time, we would be taking those tracks as we're building them south, and we would be connecting them immediately into the existing Northern California rail network. The San Joaquin service, which is owned by Caltrans and operated by Amtrak, is a very important service in the Central Valley right now. It's the 5th largest ridership in the United States on Amtrak. It's had 16 months of consecutive passenger growth. There's a lot of interest in that train system, but it shares tracks with freight. Its speeds are limited by regulation. And what we would propose is that it would come down before we actually got our high-speed rail trains running. We would shift some of that service onto the high-speed rail tracks. We could knock at least an hour off of service times there, substantially improve investments in that system, increase its speed, capacity, and safety. That's in the Central Valley. At the same time, I believe the committee is aware that we have engaged in discussions that have led to memoranda of understanding with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission in Northern California, Southern California Association of Governments, and regional rail operators in the South to make early investments, advanced investments in systems that will have immediate impacts on those urban transportation systems and lead the way towards full high-speed rail. One of the most significant is in the Northern California area, San Francisco to San Jose. On that peninsula, we would propose the electrification of the Caltrain system with a combination of our bond money as well as local match, and this is a project, as you know, Mr. Chairman, that has been an aspirational goal of people in that community for many, many years. And that is a corridor that we would be able to use for high-speed rail service as we arrive in that part of the world. Finally, we have looked at the issue of this blended approach. And by blended approach, sometimes it means many different things, but in this case, what we're saying is that we can meet the provisions of Prop 1A. We can meet the Bond Act provisions, connecting people from Los Angeles to San Francisco Transbay Terminal in 2 hours, 40 minutes, with trains that can exceed 200 miles an hour without an ongoing operating subsidy, and we can do that without having to build our own set of tracks the entire way. And that's what the blended service does for us. If you go back to our November draft plan, we said at that time that if we could become confident we could do that, as we now are, we could reduce the total cost from the $98 billion year of expenditure to $78 billion. And we sit before you today having said we can do that, and then we've made some additional changes that give us confidence that the number is in the $68 billion range. So, just to recap, the plan you have before you, we believe addresses the issue of the independent utility of the initial investments. It lays open the door to a construction of an operating high-speed rail system from the Central Valley to the Los Angeles Basin, while strengthening our existing systems. It makes investments in the urban bookends that will be important now and in the future. It commits to a more economical use of existing trackway where we can do it, and as a result, we're able to sit here today and say that the cost is lower than we had projected before. Mr. Chairman, with that, I hope that's a sufficient summary. I don't know if my colleague wishes to add anything at this point. We're certainly eager to take your questions.
Okay. And we'll get to those eventually. Let me see if Department of Finance has anything they would like to add.
Yes, just, excuse me, Matt Almy, Department of Finance. In light of your interest in linking issues 1, 2, and 3 together in kind of a coherent fashion, as Mr. Richard presented the revised business plan, the administration has submitted several proposals that align with the revised business plan that the High Speed Rail Authority has outlined. The major components would be a request for $5.8 billion of Prop 1A and federal funds to begin construction in the initial operating section of the Central Valley. An appropriation of $252 million for the environmental review and design of for multiple segments of the high-speed rail project, and then a request for $812 million of Prop 1A funds for connectivity projects. We believe that these proposals align and are consistent with the revised business plan as the High Speed Rail Authority has presented, and we are requesting these be included in this year's Budget Act.
And I know we have these spring fiscal letters, but just in terms of process, it's anticipated these will be reflected in the May revise?
No. So there was an April finance letter process that we have submitted official formal requests to the legislature, and so in order to have the legislature have adequate time for hearings and review and discussion of these proposals, we've submitted them in April as opposed to wait till May to give you sufficient time for review.
Okay. Anything else from anyone else on the A team from Finance? Let me ask if the folks from Finance could step down for just a second and bring up folks from the LAO.
Good morning. I'm Brian.
Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Brian Weatherford with the LAO, and with me I have Tiffany Roberts, who's our cap and trade expert at the LAO, and my managing principal analyst, Farrah Brock, who I believe you're all familiar with. We have reviewed the governor's budget proposals and have also reviewed the revised draft 2012 business plan that was released earlier this month, and have prepared our own summary of those, which we won't review today, but I believe our brief has been passed out to you by the sergeants. As well, for those in the audience and listening, we have made our brief available on our website, www.lao.ca.gov. So the High Speed Rail Authority presented a very nice summary of their business plan and where we are to date. So I'm going to skip right ahead, if that's all right with you, sir, to our concerns with the California High Speed Rail project as we have it before us. So, as has been consistent with our prior findings, our primary concern is with the funding for the project, and that we find that it remains highly speculative. And so we'll be discussing that in a bit more detail as well. The recent significant changes to the business plan have been coming quite quickly and rapidly, and we're being asked to move forward with this initial capital outlay request to begin construction in the Central Valley, while some key details of the plan are still being worked out. And so, in our opinion, this increases the risk and is an area of concern. So, first, with regards to funding, as the High Speed Rail Authority mentioned, they've committed to this blended system, which does indeed have a lower ultimate cost. However, the funding plan relies on receiving approximately $42 billion, which is over 60% of the total cost from the federal government, but we've only secured $3.5 billion of that money. And so it's not clear to us where the remaining $39 billion or so is going to come from and when. And the High-Speed Rail Authority and the administration also have acknowledged that there is some risk that that funding may not be forthcoming from the federal government in its entirety, and so they've proposed to use cap-and-trade auction revenues as a backstop. And so we have some concerns with that as well, and so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Tiffany Roberts to address our concerns with using cap-and-trade auction revenues for high-speed rail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Tiffany Roberts, Legislative Analyst Office. So we've discussed cap-and-trade legal issues in the past in this committee before, so I'm not going to go into a great deal of background on cap-and-trade. But as we have stated before, the cap-and-trade revenues are subject to legal constraints. Based on an opinion that we've received from Ledge Counsel, cap-and-trade revenues constitute mitigation fees. Therefore, in order for their use to be valid as mitigation fees, cap-and-trade revenues must be used to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. Given this requirement, the administration's proposal to possibly use cap-and-trade revenues for the construction of high-speed rail raises three primary concerns. Two of these concerns stem from potential legal constraints. The third concern, and I think the most important concern, relates to the policy of choosing greenhouse gas reduction strategies. First, using cap-and-trade revenues for the construction of high-speed rail would not help achieve the primary goal of AB 32. As you all know, the primary goal of that law is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. The timing of completion of this project is such that it would not even be in operation before 2020. Because of this timing issue, there could be legal risk in using cap-and-trade revenues for this infrastructure project. In fact, a recent study from UCLA states the following, and if I could read from that study, it states, using AB 32 revenues to help achieve direct reductions in greenhouse gas emissions on a timeline consistent with AB 32 is the safest way to show that auction proceeds are not being used for unrelated revenue purposes. Potential difficulties arise if the GHG reductions are unlikely to occur until after 2020 because of the AB 32's specific 2020 mandate. Now, I do want to note that the study does reference the fact that AB 32 requires that a limit remain in effect past 2020. So there is some credence to potentially using it past 2020. However, a court may not see this post-2020 limit as the primary goal of AB 32, which is essentially what presents the legal risk. We do continue to recommend that the legislature seek counsel's opinion when considering legal risk. The second issue we've raised is that high-speed rail would be a net emitter of greenhouse gas emissions for many years. While the High-Speed Rail Authority has not conducted an analysis to determine the impact that this proposed project would have on greenhouse gas emissions, an independent study has found that if the project met its ridership targets and renewable electricity commitments, construction and operation of the system would actually emit more greenhouse gas emissions than it would reduce for approximately the first 30 years that the system is in operation. That it would be a net emitter of emissions for many years could also potentially introduce legal risk. The third issue, and like I mentioned, the most important issue that we've raised, is that there are likely other greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies that would reduce more emissions for less money. As we've discussed in our recent brief on cap and trade, in allocating auction revenues, we recommend that the legislature prioritize greenhouse gas mitigation programs that have the greatest potential return on investment in terms of emission reductions per dollar invested. So considering the cost of a high-speed rail system relative to other greenhouse gas reduction strategies such as green building codes or energy efficiency standards, a thorough cost-benefit analysis of all possible strategies is likely to reveal that the state has a number of other cost-effective options. In other words, rather than allocating billions of dollars in cap-and-trade auction revenues for the construction of a new transportation system that would not reduce greenhouse gas emissions for many years, the state could develop targeted investments in programs that are actually designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and would do so at a much faster rate and at a significantly lower cost.
All right. So in addition, as I indicated, we have some additional concerns, and these are secondary, but nonetheless are very relevant to our discussion today. So the business plan, as we learned, has made some significant changes to its plan, and we think that many of these have a tremendous amount of merit. Introducing more benefits earlier in the San Francisco and LA existing mass transportation systems is going to likely create more benefits earlier than the initial construction project by itself, as well as the concept to bring more benefits online for the initial Central Valley construction earlier through the Northern Unified Operating Service, which has been proposed. However, we'd like to note that we haven't seen any details on the Northern Unified Operating Service, and we certainly haven't seen any estimate of the quantification of those benefits. And we think it's a reasonable assumption that those benefits, should they be quantified on a net present basis, would be far less than the $6 billion cost of that infrastructure, especially in light of the unlikely nature of receiving the funding, the remaining funding to extend that service to its intended benefit of connecting the Central Valley to Los Angeles. In addition, there's other details that seem to be in flux, such as whether or not the system will or will not be going to Anaheim seems to change from week to week, and it's also further unclear whether some of the just the general, there's additional risk. As these MOUs have been developed, we're seeing how the High-Speed Rail Authority is proposing to work with the local governments to construct local rail projects that might benefit high-speed rail, but in doing so, they're engaging in dialogue that has traditionally been the domain of the Division of Rail at Caltrans, which engages with the federal government and the local agencies to build these grade crossing projects and so forth. And so we need to understand the details of who would be the primary state point of contact at the state level for intercity rail in the state, as well as how there's going to be greater coordination with the High-Speed Rail Authority and the other rail operators in the state. And this has been difficult in the past due to the persistently high number of vacancies in key positions at the High-Speed Rail Authority. So those are our concerns at this point. We do have a number of recommendations, but I believe it's your preference to save those until we address the BCPs.
No, you can go ahead and comment on those now.
All right. So in view of, thank you, in view of those concerns that we've raised regarding the uncertainty of the future funding, as well as the recent and significant changes to the plan, at this time, just in general, we do not recommend the legislature approve the governor's various budget proposals to provide additional funding for the construction of the high-speed rail project in the Central Valley. However, we do recommend that the legislature appropriate some level of funding to continue the planning efforts that are currently underway, because we have spent a lot of money, several hundred millions of dollars, in developing the preliminary engineering and environmental clearances, which we are expecting to start receiving those environmental clearances in this coming fiscal year and the following fiscal year. And so should the funding situation change, or the will of the people of California change in the future, it would be very costly and time-consuming to start this process all over again from scratch. So we recommend continuing those. In addition, once the necessary environmental clearances have been received, it will then be possible to, should the legislature wish to move forward in this way, to preserve critical right-of-way for high-speed rail, so it's not developed or turned into other uses that would make it very difficult to construct high-speed rail in the future. And this can be done through the purchases of easements in addition to outright acquisition. And in this way, the legislature could retain its options to proceed in the future, should it choose not to proceed with construction this year. Alternatively, we certainly do understand that the legislature may choose to move forward with approving the governor's proposal to begin construction in this year. Given the numerous threats to the project's successful completion, we would recommend several steps be taken to improve the chances of the project's successful completion. The first one of those is we've looked into options to improve the legislature's oversight, and it would be possible to appropriate just the funding for the contracts that are to be awarded in this fiscal year and some of the money for beginning to acquire right-of-way, as opposed to appropriating the entire $5.9 billion this year. We have a figure in our brief that shows the 5 construction packages proposed by the High-Speed Rail Authority. If you're interested, that is figure 4 on page 7 of our brief. And it shows that the first construction package will be awarded, is anticipated to be awarded at least in December 2012. However, the remaining construction packages will all be awarded in later fiscal years. The first several in September of 2013, and so there's no legal requirement that we appropriate that money in this fiscal year's budget. In addition, we have in our prior report, high-speed rail is at a critical juncture that we released in May 2011, as well as at the present time. We believe it's important to continue to work towards improving the governance of the high-speed rail project. And I know the High-Speed Rail Authority is also committed to this as well. In our High-Speed Rail is at a critical juncture report, we recommended at that time that the responsibility for the development of the project from High-Speed Rail Authority to Caltrans be recommended. And we would reiterate that now. However, we also understand that with the governor's reorganization proposal that other alternatives can be considered for improving governance. There are a number of other concerns that we've raised and that the legislature and other observers have raised regarding other concerns with the High-Speed Rail Authority, and so we're proposing that the legislature adopt budget bill language requiring the new CEO to come before the legislature after they've had some reasonable amount of time to develop a strategic plan and present their ideas on how they would develop a strategy and timeline for filling vacancies and improving retention, how the High-Speed Rail Authority will ensure appropriate levels of coordination with other state, regional, and private transportation entities, steps that would be taken to ensure adequate contractor management and oversight, as well as how new sources of project funding will be developed in the future. Finally, it will be important for the High-Speed Rail Authority to provide certain critical information and documents that they have indicated that are forthcoming, but that we have not yet seen. And so we'd like to formally request on the record that the High-Speed Rail Authority provide a copy of its study that it's developing with the Union of International Railways, examining how the high-speed rail, examining the operations and maintenance costs of high-speed rail in international systems and how they compare to the High-Speed Rail Authority's estimated costs. In addition, we'd like to see the MOU with the Northern Unified Operating Service. And lastly, the analysis that the High-Speed Rail Authority is working on with the Air Resources Board on the net impact of that high-speed rail would have on the state's greenhouse gas emissions. And that concludes my comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. It had been my intention to take public comment before we took questions from the committee, but given the volume of information, I just want to double check and see whether committee members would okay, sure. Mr. Valdeo.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, on the comments about the 30 years on the GHG emissions, when do those 30 years start?
That would be basically current year, so from construction. So they're estimating a time period between 2030 through 2050, probably more likely 2060.
So 2060 is when when the 30 years would be up. So you're looking at 2030.
The 2050 would be when the 30 years would be up. And then the way that the study evaluated this, it looked at a period between 2030 and 2050. And it basically said that you would likely reduce greenhouse gas emissions between that time period, or you would become net neutral. Let me correct myself. And then by 2060, you are very likely to become net neutral.
And are you making the assumption that, or is this on the whole track being completed? Because in the business plan, they don't actually have the whole track. There's no timeline for that. No one has any idea when it will be done. Because 2028 is only the first 500 miles.
It is my understanding that this study was based on the Phase 1 completion from San Francisco to LA, but I think that's something that we could also follow up on just to confirm that detail.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from committee before we take some public comment? Mr. Jones?
Not a question so much as just a statement. I really appreciate the LAO's thoughtful analysis on this. And I'm sorry, okay. And my perception is that you're being very objective and fair to the process, and you're raising some serious concerns. You've raised some concerns today that I hadn't even considered. So, you know, I'll be looking more into those and trying to figure out, you know, how I feel about those things or think about those things. So I just wanted to encourage you to remain diligent on this issue and continue to give us thoughtful analysis. Thank you.
Okay, and
I didn't realize I could ask the high-speed rail guys some questions.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'm curious on the $6 billion investment. Does that include the full HSR electrification and control ready to run on the original $6 billion?
The original $6 billion did not. When Assemblyman, the original $6 billion did not include either electrification or positive train control. As we were preparing for this budget submission, it was our intent that we would be augmenting that if all we were building was that piece to include electrification and positive train control. Now, in fact, what we're talking about is building an initial operating segment which will have electrification and positive train control for the entire length of that, approximately 300 miles from ultimately Merced to Burbank.
But now you're talking about the 33 billion portion?
It's about that. It's about that. That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the authority is now working with communities, the northern, southern parts of the alignment. The Central Valley portion, obviously, Amtrak's a big deal to a lot of the small communities.
Yes,
that's the way that people in those communities get from one to the next. With the high-speed rail, I mean, we would appreciate having the same luxury of working and trying to use existing lines and take advantage of what's already there, and taking these away is kind of a big deal to us.
If I might, Assembly Member, it's a big deal to us as well. I was in your part of the state, in Kings County. I appeared before the Board of Supervisors there, and of course we have some members of that body here today. And I was asked this very question, Assemblyman, about the future of the Amtrak service. One of the nice things about this job is I've been moving around the state. I have been on those trains, and I've seen the ridership, and I can see how important they are to those communities. Stops in Hanford and Wasco and Corcoran. People use these almost like a bus to move back and forth. The current contemplation is that at some point passenger service would move off of that line onto high-speed rail, which, by the way, has its own benefits in providing additional capacity, safety, and throughput for goods movement, particularly agricultural produce, out of the valley to the ports, which is very important to us. But we can't lose sight of the service to those communities. What I said to the supervisors in Kings County, what I would say to you today, is that we like the idea that's been propounded by the Kern County Council of Governments to look at a continuing local service on those lines to continue to provide service. And this goes to one of the issues that Mr. Weatherford and LAO raised. We are now working very, very closely with Caltrans on many of these issues, and particularly the Northern California Rail Network and the issues that you raised. The governor has proposed a reorganization that would have high-speed rail under a new transportation agency with Caltrans as a sister agency. We've already begun to work in that fashion, and we have talked with them about this issue. We will continue to work it, Assembly Member, and we will keep you and members of the legislature informed of that.
trying to think. One of my questions had to do with the city of Fresno. They had given you a list of questions. I know the timeline's not up, but I think that those questions kind of fall in line with a lot of the other communities. When you go through these communities and you affect them with the alignment, I guess the real question is, do you have an actual alignment that we can go to our communities and figure out exactly how this is going to affect our tax base, how it's going to affect our businesses? I know I've asked for this in the past. You haven't been able to deliver just yet. What percentage of the plans are actually drawn up today?
Well, where we are today, Assembly Member, is that in the Valley right now we're pursuing two different environmental processes. One is for the portion from Merced to Fresno, and the other is for the portion from Fresno to Bakersfield. On the northern piece of that, Merced to Fresno, it's our anticipation the High-Speed Rail Authority will adopt and certify that EIR sometime in May. That will then fix the alignment. This week we sent out notices to people in Fresno indicating that we could start the appraisal process. And it's very important because...
These notices went to who? The property owners?
Property owners, yes, sir.
So they know now that they're...
They know now that they are in an alignment that is being looked at for high-speed rail.
And this is in the city of Fresno?
It's in Fresno and some other portions north.
How far south does it go? You go down to Bakersfield yet?
No, sir, because that's the next EIR, which we anticipate will be in front of us for certification at the end of this year. And I just want to make this point quickly, Assemblyman. One of the difficulties that we've had is that, first of all, we could have done a better job, there's no question about that, in communicating with people. But any person whose home or farm or dairy or business is likely to be affected has a lot of questions. What does this mean? When's it going to happen? What kind of mitigation is there?
Well, those questions are also for the people that represent those communities, the
Absolutely.
Supervisors and the city councils, because all those businesses create tax revenue that help run the city governments.
And so I would just say two things to you quickly. One is that by law, we're not allowed to have specific conversations with people about mitigation or compensation until the EIR is certified. And so one of the reasons we wanted to kind of get a jump on this is that we want to be able to answer people's questions. Number two is that we have been working very, very closely with the city of Fresno in particular, with the leadership there, the mayor and city council, to start to look at planning for relocation, and we're looking at small alignment changes, how we would do road changes to protect key businesses there. In particular, businesses that are export businesses that are very vital to that community. So I think what you'll find, Assemblyman, and we're happy to come and brief you on this, is that we are literally going block by block, farm by farm, dairy by dairy, to look at these impacts, figure out how we can mitigate them. What we can't mitigate, landowners will need to receive full compensation, both in terms of relocation services, drilling new wells, all those things we have to do. We just haven't been able to get into those detailed discussions yet because by law we can't until the environmental documents are done.
Thank you.
Ms. Butler, do you have a question at this point?
Just a quick comment, and that is that I know there's a lot of issues we need to work out, funding being a big one, but I am completely and totally on board for making sure that high-speed rail happens here in California. I know we have to work out a lot of things, but whatever I can do to assist, this is the future. It's how we're going to get our 50 million people around the state. So whatever I can do, please know I'm on board and ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Mr. Chairman, at some point, some of the issues that the LAO raised were ones that we certainly could have comments on, but we'll do that any way you want, even
Let me allow you to do that now. We'll take those comments, and then I'm going to open it up for public comment, and then we'll have a further discussion with the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very quick. First of all, I want to start by thanking Ms. Brock and Mr. Weatherford. They were very professional in the way they called us yesterday, gave us a heads up about the pending report. We appreciated that quite a bit. Let me also start with those things with which we agree. At the end of Mr. Weatherford's presentation, he was talking about governance issues, the importance of that, the importance of reporting and oversight. The kinds of things that he mentioned there are things that we would embrace. One of the things that we have told LAO, and I appreciated his acknowledgement of it, is that as Mr. Rossi and I came on board, we both have corporate backgrounds. We looked at the High-Speed Rail Authority. We saw real weaknesses there in terms of organizational governance and accountability, and we've created a Finance and Audit Committee. Mr. Rossi, who is the former Vice Chairman of Bank of America, former Chief Risk Officer of that institution, is in charge of that committee, and we're basically putting in place those types of governance and oversight functions so that the board is accountable, we're accountable to you. We should be in a much better position to provide reporting, and so we would fully embrace what LAO has proposed there. We would work with you and other members of the legislature to make sure that there is adequate oversight of this very major project. So we definitely agree with that. Where we would disagree is three principal areas. First of all, I spent 12 years on the BART board in the transit world. We never knew where all the money was coming from. Our colleagues in Southern California just adopted a $540 billion regional transportation plan for the Southland for the next 20 years. Same time period we're talking about here. They don't know where all the money's coming from. In San Jose, they just had a groundbreaking last week for the next leg of BART to San Jose. I helped start that project when I was on the BART board. We didn't know where all the money was coming from. They still don't know where all the money's coming from. It is just part and parcel of the transportation world that people don't know these things now. The key then is, as you build, knowing that you don't know what you'll be able to build next, can you build something of value? So, I mean, when I got on the BART board, there was a project, BART to Warm Springs. Warm Springs doesn't even exist on a map of California. It's a community. No one knew what that was going to mean. Well, it was the jumping off point for BART to San Jose. So the key is, as you build, do you build something that has value? We believe what we've presented to you is something that has value. Even if we did not get additional federal funds, even if we did not have access to the backstop cap and trade dollars, simply building this leg in the valley, acquiring the right-of-way that Mr. Weatherford talked about, connecting to the Northern California rail network, and being poised to jump the critical rail gap between Bakersfield and Palmdale, we believe that has value. And when you add into that the early investments we're talking about, electrification of Caltrain, the interregional connector in Southern California, and so forth, we believe the entire program has value and will continue to have value, and we will not build any new legs unless we have the dollars and we know that they will have independent utility and value. The second point I want to make is that with respect to cap and trade, I'm not an expert on this, but the attorneys, the people at ARB, the lawyers we've worked with and so forth, tell us that cap and trade revenues, should we need to access them, are a legally constituted program that is available to us. The ARB scoping plan for AB 32, done several years ago, specifically mentioned high-speed rail as one of the areas that was suitable for use of cap and trade revenues. Now, that is a matter that is going to be decided probably in other forums, but from our standpoint, we have been given by the Governor and the Director of Finance access to a legally constituted dedicated revenue source. And I would say that when I said before nobody knows where all the money's coming from, my friend Will Kempton, who heads your Legislative Peer Review Committee, has always had a rejoinder to that and said, but at least those other agencies had some window they could go to, some dedicated funding source. Well, we do now with cap and trade. And by the way, while we have cap and trade, let's look at what's happened to our brethren in the industry. The majority in the House of Representatives has proposed slamming the door after 30 years on mass transit access to the Highway Trust Fund. That bill is on its 13th extension, this time for 90 days, because they couldn't agree on a 2-year bill. And the most I've ever seen is a 6-year authorization bill. So I'm going to sit here today without being glib and say we may have one of the more stable dedicated revenue sources in the transit world today. Finally, I want to point out that Mr. Weatherford did say that they appreciated that we were providing more benefits earlier. But there's a disconnect between that and the analysis they did on the carbon benefits. Because, in fact, if we're talking about making investments in Caltrain electrification, we're going to be reducing carbon emissions immediately, before 2020. If we're talking about increasing the frequency and capacity on existing rail lines, same thing. So we're not familiar with the study that they mentioned. Other studies that we've seen show very different results. But even without that, there's a disconnect between saying they like seeing the early benefits, but there's been no recognition that there's carbon benefits associated with the economic benefits. Finally, this point. The people at the Legislative Analyst's Office are there to protect the taxpayers of California, and I understand that, and we respect that, and we've tried to deal with them in return, respectfully and professionally. But I would submit to you that they've only looked at one side of the risk equation. Are there risks of moving forward with high-speed rail? Yes, there are. It's a major infrastructure project for the state. It involves a significant capital expenditure. It involves impacts on the general fund, and there are questions that need to be answered. But are there risks of not moving forward? Yes, and I don't believe those were discussed or addressed. I asked LAO yesterday, are you recommending, in saying not to go forward now, that the state walk away from $3.3 billion of federal funding? Their answer was yes. If we piecemeal these contracts, there is a risk that the contracts will cost more. There is a risk that what we have to do to maintain mobility for our citizens will cost more. So I only ask that we balance those risks. And Mr. Rossi reminds me, I mean, we appreciate their notion of going forward and trying to secure right-of-way, but I think that is problematic also because communities don't know what's going to happen. Then we'd be buying up properties in Fresno and other places. I don't think any of us want to be associated with the linear alignment that has weeds growing up in it and nothing else because we're waiting. So thank you for that opportunity, Mr. Chairman. I hope I didn't exceed time on that.
No, I'm going to go to Mr. Huffman for a quick question before we open up public comment. I do want to make one suggestion to you.
Yes, sir.
Is that in the future, I would be cautious about talking about the fact that the governor has given you a dedicated funding source. We have some debate here as to whether that is really our responsibility, and that the legislature is the one who makes these appropriations. So we have a debate going on between the governor and ourselves over how the cap-and-trade plan will be developed.
If I might both apologize and also amend and correct my remarks to say the governor's allowed us to ask the legislature. And I will be extremely vigilant to not make that mistake again. Thank you.
Mr. Huffman.
Mr. Rich, your artful point just made is pretty consistent with what I was about to say. I was about to thank you for what I have come to appreciate as a huge change in direction and leadership with the High-Speed Rail Authority. I think leadership matters, and we've been having these kind of hearings and hearing from the authority for as long as I've been in the legislature, and all too often it has been an agency that has seemed arrogant, non-responsive, stubborn, and frankly it was very hard for me to have confidence that we were on a path to success. It seemed to me that we were on a path to a rather historic failure. I have a very different sense today. I know that we still have some work to do, but the sense I get from the authority under your leadership is one of competency, of responsiveness, of creativity, and candor. So I just want to thank you for a fundamental change in a fairly short amount of time. Again, I think we have more work to do, but I have a feeling now that we're on a path to success, and that's just a tremendous difference from prior meetings that we've had with the authority. I just want to ask you one question, and it is one of my long-standing wishes or critiques of the project has been I'm not a fan of the Pacheco Pass alignment. And I think particularly when we talk about the possibility of major greenhouse gas reductions that would lend themselves to the use of revenues from cap and trade, we want to make sure that we are investing in net greenhouse gas reduction and not the possibility of a project that could lead to poor planning and sprawl and potentially even increased vehicle miles traveled. So I want to give you a chance to speak to the state of play of the Pacheco piece of this. I know we're a long ways off from that actually being constructed, but what is the current thinking on that?
First of all, thank you for your kind remarks. Assemblyman, actually, tomorrow at the High Speed Rail Authority, pursuant to a court directive, we have to decertify and we propose to recertify our program-level environmental documents with respect to the San Francisco to Merced portion, and that will include another look at Pacheco Pass versus Altamont Pass. And so I don't want to presuppose what the authority will do at that point. But let me say to you that whichever of those alignments we end up with, I believe we have significant environmental issues that we must deal with. There are local environmental issues. We've got the grasslands if we go Pacheco Pass. We have the Don Edwards Wildlife Preserve if we go Altamont. In either case, we have to move with care. I think one of the other issues, and I'm just learning these issues, but I think what's very, very important is I was reading the Bond Act again this weekend. It says there should be no station between Gilroy and Merced. We have talked about, and I know we've talked with Peter Calthorpe about not having a station in Los Banos because it could be very growth-inducing. And so what I would say to you is we're going to continue to work these issues. But in addition, Assemblyman, and I know this is something that you care about very much, I believe high-speed rail needs to be a leading tool for how we make SB 375 happen in this state, transit land use planning. And we're working with communities. We're offering them resources. We're certainly not going to impose anything on them, but we've got some high levels of excitement from leadership in Palmdale and Fresno and other communities to actually do some joint planning with us providing resources so that we can really come to this body and say that we're not just building a train, but we're trying to achieve other public policy objectives as well, like that one. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And with that, please stay where you are. We're going to invite public comment. And the way I'm going to do that is if folks would line up in the center. And we're going to use the microphone at either end of the dais. And we'll ask folks to move to one side or the other, and we'll and everyone will be given 2 minutes, and I will, as politely as I can, cut you off when you extend beyond that. I want to make sure that we have time to hear at least initially from everyone, and I also want everyone to be aware that if you feel that you're unable to make all of your comments within that 2-minute time frame, and we're more than happy to take written comment and would welcome that. So having said that, we'll begin and start over here.
Yes, my name's Ron Hoggard. 26 years in city government management in Kings County, retired. Appreciate getting to address you today. You know, over the past few years, we've heard a project of $33 billion, $40 billion, $98 billion, maybe as much as $117 billion, now back to $68.4 billion, and this has moved around quite a bit. And I would just like to say this: if we all got together to build a home, and it was going to, we had a contractor, and it was going to cost $500,000. But before we got started, the contractor came back and said, you know, it's going to be $1 million, and it's not a 3-bedroom, now it's a 2-bedroom home. We would have the opportunity to say, you know, that's not what I signed up for. And I'm feeling like the train has left the station, and the voters of California are not on board. And so it would seem that we ought to not go forward with this because the funding isn't there, and I appreciate Many big projects, perhaps the funding isn't there. But this isn't what we sold the voters of California. And I think if we can't just stop this, then we need to send it back and let them take another look at this. Because I do believe otherwise we're not doing the people's work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Chairman Gordon, members of the Assembly, thank you for having us here. I have to read this because I'm not as polished as most politicians, so excuse me. My name is Doug Verboon. I'm a member of Kings County Board of Supervisors. I'm here today to express my board's deep concerns about and opposition to the most recent business plan of the High-Speed Rail Authority. The Safe, Reliable High-Speed Rail Passenger Bond Act for the 21st century, Prop 1A 2008, did not contemplate the use of 19th century technology, blending and hopping tracks to get from one of this great state to another. The April 2nd, 2012 revised business plan of the California High-Speed Rail uses schemes, distractions, and pure speculations to try to convince the reader it meets the exacting standards of the Act. However, it contains the same defects of the prior 3 renditions and therefore is ineligible for Prop 1A funding. The plan utilizes the same initial 130-mile segment, no matter how it is named, through the Central Valley using conventional, non-electrified rail. The entire Prop 1A money will be spent on this segment with no money in the bank or even in federal or state horizon to complete the blending and transformation into this patchwork high-speed rail. Even with the blending, the trains hopping required to complete the Los Angeles to San Francisco trip violates Prop 1A and exceeds the 2-hour and 40-minute trip maximum. The plan is the same old house with a 4th coat of paint. To allow Prop 1A funds to be used this way would be tantamount to a great train robbery from the voters of California. To create a 130-mile segment that runs through Kings County and has openly been identified as Amtrak fallback is an irresponsible act and of devastation to the San Joaquin Amtrak dependent downtown to downtown Hanford and Corcoran. This is unconscionable waste of taxpayers' money and an affirmative decision to destroy established economies. Cost savings or not, if it is impossible to meet the specific and exact standard of the Safe, Reliable, High-Speed Train Rail Bond Act for the 21st century, after 4 attempts, this is time to stop the bleeding and let the voters rest assured that their children's children will not be paying for this boondoggle. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Next.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure before I begin that everyone has a copy. I have a handout for people on the dais, and I think the authority has it too. Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Alexis, and I'm representing Californians Advocating Responsible Rail Design. This morning, I want to talk about the plan, and actually what I want to talk about is the fact that there seem to be many different plans. There is the plan that they will certify tomorrow in the program EIR, which specifies a 4-track system on the EIR, on the peninsula. There are project-level EIRs, which say very different things. There is the new business plan, which has a completely different set of parameters than the program-level EIR, or even the project-level EIR, which at last point did not even mention the word Amtrak. Finally, in addition, there is the public presentation of the business plan, which is actually quite different than the actual business plan. And then the last, but certainly not least, are the promises that have been made by various members of the boards and others to people in the legislature and everybody else, which differ quite substantially from those in actual written documents. This is obviously a problem from a process standpoint. What are communities, people, anybody supposed to count on when they think about making investments over the next 5, 10, and 20 years? But there are some substantial contradictions between these different plans, and I would like to point out one in this diagram. The authority presented at the last board meeting as representative of the travel times that the blended one-seat ride would be 2 hours and 40 minutes, and that is important for 2 reasons. One, there's a legal reason for that, but it's also important because to be a competitive, the time will impact whether this can be a competitive service or not. But in the actual bowels of the plan, we look and we see that there are 4 trains planned from Transbay Terminal to Los Angeles. One will be 3 hours, and the others will be 3.5 hours or longer. And we believe that these are actually accurate representations because they are based on the analysis that Caltrain did to see what would be the impact on travel times if you were to share a corridor for 50 miles. So this is not the only one of these. For instance, we just heard Mr. Richard say he supports the Amtrak service. Well, the same document said that Amtrak south of Merced would be discontinued. When we look at the prices of tickets, you would have right now as a Hanford ride that's downtown to downtown Fresno for $5. That would now be $38, and it would be farmland to the other side.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Vice Mayor for the City of Hanford. It's kind of interesting to listen to all of the statistics, studies, and I can tell you firsthand, as a citizen, I use that Amtrak quite frequently. I travel to San Diego. I have a grandson there. Economic-wise, I watch all kinds of people climb on that train. You can't put them on a different train. They do it because it's convenient, because it's accessible. Because when they get in late at night at 11:30 in our small communities, that's the best that they can do. Cost is everything. These economic times, we're borrowing money from sources that were assigned for certain things. When I sit down and make decisions as a council member for my community, the first thing I expect is my staff to provide responsible information, truthful. Where the source of funding is assigned, does it belong, and should it be? Then my second concern, most and foremost, are the businesses within that community and what they rely on. Now, when I come home from San Diego, I have a lot of tourists who come to Hanford to enjoy. That train is what they ride, Amtrak. They come for our ice cream and our hospitality. But more importantly, it's because we are who we are. We're unique, and we're not big city. We don't want to be. We don't try to be. When we want big city, we travel to big city. Okay? But you can't take two concepts and tell us it's the same fruit salad. They are different, uniquely, because they are to be. So I sit on both sides of the fence in making decisions for a community and the well-being, making sure that we use money responsibly. We also have to make responsible decisions on how we spend it and their needs, true needs. Do we fix what we have that doesn't work today versus building something that we may or may not have all the plans in place? You don't build a house or make a dress without knowing how to stitch it and finish it when you start with it.
All right, thank you very much. Next.
Morning, Assembly members. My name is Rita Westby. I'm a co-founder of CARD, and I've come with a topic sentence, and it is oversight done right. Although there are many potential ways to do high-speed rail right, there's really only one way to do oversight right, and that is to keep your eyes open and respond appropriately to what you see. And I've lumped what can be seen into three categories. There's what meets the sniff test, ridership, and therefore revenues, and therefore operating subsidies don't really meet the sniff test. With lowered ridership, it's not necessarily a green project anymore. Jobs numbers did not really meet the sniff test the way they've been thrown around, and project costs that bounce around like a state lottery ball. There's expert opinion. You've heard from the LAO, the peer review group, the auditor, the treasurer, the state inspector general, and they all have very important critical things that need to be heard and responded to appropriately. There's the third is the compliance with state laws, which is naturally the most important. The funding plan does not meet the law. The ILS funding is not identified except in vague wishful thinking, but you know, Disney wrote a song about wishing on stars. They're about $20 billion short. Environmental clearances are not complete. This is a checkbox that they need to check in order to have a viable funding plan, and it is not checked. And the project no longer reflects Prop 1A. Now, these things, in particular, violations of laws you yourselves here have put in place, cannot be ignored. Or rather, they should not be ignored. But as we're learning, they can be, and they are being ignored. And, there ought to be a law. And in fact, there are laws which were voted on by the people of California. And these were part of Prop 1A's guarantee that nothing could go wrong. And they were part of the bold print that was promised to us. They were not part of the fine print at the bottom. It is part of why people voted for Prop 1A. So yes, there ought to be a law. But if you're willing to turn a blind eye and fund this project under these conditions, then really, why bother? As you attempt to move this project forward...
Sorry, thank you very much. Time is up. You concluding sentence?
We ask for oversight done right as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next.
Good morning, members. Richard Valley, Kings County Supervisor, representing District 2. Mr. Chair. Members, as you can see, a lot of folks from Kings County here again, and we continue to be disturbed that even though we've appeared before the High-Speed Rail Authority many times to speak about the negative impacts of this poorly planned project to the County of Kings, and specifically to testify on the importance of our Amtrak stations in the city of Hanford and the city of Corcoran, to see language adopted last week in San Francisco that brings one step closer to reality the fears of losing those stations, that just sends us a message that we're continuing to be ignored. Members, you understand how long you have been meeting in these hearings, having these discussions. Assemblymember Huffman spoke about it earlier, laying out the timeline. Yes, been talking about it. So put this in the timeline. It took until Tuesday, April 3rd, for the High-Speed Rail Authority to finally come down to Kings County and meet with myself and the other members of the Kings County Board of Supervisors, and more importantly, to hear from the members of the County of Kings, the taxpayers, on how they're being impacted. I'm here to represent to you today, members, at Kings County. We are in the fight of our lives against this project and what it will do to our county. And last week, thanks to Mother Nature, Kings County farmers are now fighting hail. Over 250 acres have been reported at 100% crop loss due to the loss due to hail damage. So rail and hail, those are our two battlefronts. Members, you can help us with one of those issues. That other issue is in God's hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Keith Dunn here for the Association for California High-Speed Trains. I'd like to commend the authority for the revised business plan, which is a direct result of listening to members of the legislature and the communities. This new leadership has gone out and met with those communities and taken those comments in and tried to build it into this plan. We've done a lot of talking about numbers. I just want to throw a few simple numbers out there for you, for those of us that weren't math majors in college. 4 and 22. 4 of the most densely populated communities in the United States are in California. 22 million people who are going to be with us here in California over the next 20 years. The high-speed rail is going to come in at a time when we're going to have increased populations. It's going to increase our ability to move goods and citizens throughout this state. Is it hard? Is it difficult? Yes, of course. If it was easy, they'd build it in Nevada. We do hard things in California all the time. We can do this. I have great faith in our new leadership, and I look forward to working with the legislature and the new leadership to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Pedro Murillas from the California Public Interest Research Group, CalPIRG. One way or another, California is going to have to improve the options that we have for transportation to meet our growing population needs. We believe that high-speed rail is the best option that we have, and the longer that we wait, the higher the price tag is going to get. And so when the time comes, we would urge the legislature to approve the funding to get this project started. Thank you.
Thank you. You win the award for brevity. Next.
Good morning, Chairman Gordon and members. I'm Michael Cunningham with the Bay Area Council, representing Bay Area employers in the Bay Area business community. Our organization is extremely encouraged by the revisions to the business plan, but even more than that, we are extraordinarily excited about the authority's commitment to make early investments in the bookends of the system. As you know, in the Bay Area, this early investment means electrifying Caltrain at the front end of the process rather than at the back end. This saves money by avoiding years of inflation. It avoids a much more expensive 4-track build scenario. It lays the groundwork for the future statewide system of high-speed rail, and it delivers benefits early and immediately to the Bay Area where they are most badly needed. I represent a business group and major employers. We are critically aware that this San Francisco-San Jose Peninsula corridor is the shining star of the California economy. It's a shining star of the national economy. It's a not insignificant contributor to the general fund of the state of California and certainly to many of the local communities. Electrification of the Caltrain corridor will overcome many of the significant barriers to the continued vitality and prosperity of the employers in that region. It'll ensure that the world's most innovative companies can continue to be born and, as they grow and add jobs, stay in that important region and contribute their economic prosperity and jobs to the state of California. Thank you for your support.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Mr. Chairman, David Schoenborn, President of TransDef. We are one of the litigants challenging the environmental documents of the authority. We're transit activists that strongly support high-speed rail but have zero confidence in the high-speed rail authority. I'm here to say that the business plan is not a business plan. First, there's no business, and second, there's no plan. There's no money. All it is a sales job to butter you up to release bond funds to match the ARA funding. And that is not a statewide project. We think the authority got distracted by the availability of ARA funding and totally lost sight of the realities of building a statewide system. In particular, the availability of public funds has allowed them to avoid having to attract private industry partners. We believe that had ARA funds not come along, the authority would not be before you seeking funds for this project. Instead, they would have been forced to find a private sector partner, which would have resulted in a project in the I-5 corridor at a dramatically lower cost and without the public opposition that you're hearing so much of. We urge you to turn down the governor's budget request and create a state structure that will get a public-private partnership going. We're convinced that a political body like the authority is inherently incapable of creating a cost-effective, revenue-generating system. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, representing the unionized construction industry in California, also representing, depending on the craft, at least 30% unemployed workers in this state. This is the type of project that states can do. They don't have the printing press that they have in Washington, D.C. They don't have the Federal Reserve. They pass bonds. They put bonds on the ballot. People vote for them. And then you exercise your oversight over those bonds and get the money out to create jobs, which is exactly what this project would do, which is exactly what the state needs to help spur its economic recovery. All the opponents who've come up here all they do is say no. They don't acknowledge the fact, I think Mr. Huffman brought it up, that we need transportation solutions to get us through the next 50 years in this state. I think it was the LAO report, one of the reports that has been done on this project said that the needed runway capacity, airport expansion capacity, freeway capacity would cost twice as much as this project. We believe that, from the construction industry, we want to build those things too. But we understand that that takes a long time as well, and we need dependable statewide rail service to augment those additions to the freeway capacity and the airport capacity. The population keeps rising. We're going to need these things moving forward. The answer cannot just be no. It needs to be what's happening in this building, which is a deep discussion on this. I've been doing this for 10 years, lobbying. I don't know of any other issue that's had this much oversight in committee hearings and discussion in my 10 years here. I think there's tremendous oversight being handled here, and I applaud this committee and all the committees that have done that, and the new leadership at the High Speed Rail Authority. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Thank you. My name is Michael Quigley. I'm with the California Alliance for Jobs. We represent 2,500 union construction contractors and over 80,000 union construction workers in Central and Northern California. Echoing the comments from my colleague, construction is the leading indicator of economic activity, and right now our industry is facing over 2.5 times the unemployment level of the rest of the state. With high-speed rail, that number can come down dramatically. The amount of economic activity that would be generated through this project would ripple across the state and would be a catalyst that could help turn around our current economic situation. The business plan, as proposed, is something that's been receiving a lot of input both from the public and from legislators. It takes some very important, smart, and cost-effective steps, like moving towards a blended approach on the peninsula, that make it a progress, move the project forward in a way that would make it more palatable to the constituents that it will be facing. I think that this project, although it's had some problems in the past, we've turned a corner, we have new leadership, new ideas, and it's time to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Committee Chair and committee members, Mark Kyle, Operating Engineers, Local 3. We represent approximately 24,000 working men and women here in Northern California, from deputy sheriffs to construction workers, including hundreds of members and thousands of members in Madera, Tulare, Kings County, and Fresno, up and down the Central Valley. Our members have suffered high unemployment along with other construction workers, and our members want to, more than anything else, go back to work. They want to build infrastructure in California. They want to build the high-speed rail. They want their kids to be able to breathe good air, unlike what you find in the Central Valley now. They want to help Californians and the 12 million that are anticipated in another 20 years to be able to move up and down California. They want to help improve the mobility of California. And they want to stop the hemorrhaging of the economic mess in the Central Valley, the loss of jobs and of homes and families. High-speed rail can address that better than any other infrastructure project, and we think it can also address poor air quality and increased mobility up and down the state. Our members want to go back to work. We're looking for you to put aside the nitpicking aspects of the naysayers, embrace a bold, visionary future, and move this project forward. I want to commend not only the new revised business plan, but the efforts by the leadership of this committee, by the members of this committee. You will have ample work ahead of you in the next several months, and I'm sure other committee hearings. And I want to urge you to allocate the funds on behalf of this project as expeditiously as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Good morning, David Schwagel. I'm a professional engineer with Californians for High-Speed Rail. The financial concerns that you have expressed are extremely well taken. I would like to point out Texas Transportation Institute indicates that congestion costs Californians $19 billion every year, plus NHTSA says that we lose 3,000 to 4,000 lives every year. Had we made the $20 billion investment in high-speed rail in 1980, we would be seeing $560 billion in economic benefits just from congestion relief alone. Plus, we would have saved 50,000 lives. Plus, we would have had extremely prosperous city centers, as high-speed rail is in fact the catalyst for the next new real estate boom with the transit-oriented development in and around the city centers. The agricultural and energy security, yes. We want to do everything possible to preserve and enhance California's multi-billion-dollar agricultural industry, the third largest in the world. High-speed rail is the only form of transportation that is not subject to congestion. We merely increase the frequency and length of trains. Plus, wind turbines, solar modules on farms, sell that power back to the authority. Study the French mitigation techniques, and we will indeed produce a prosperous California future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is John Carlson from Sunnyvale. I'm afraid I'm representing only myself, but I would like to share with you my support for trains as being the most energy efficient means of transportation, second only to watercraft. I'd also like to thank particularly the efforts of Mr. Robert. Since the meeting last month, hosted by Senator Smidian in Mountain View, I've become quite encouraged by the changes to the business plan. However, I still have some grave concerns regarding the Pacheco Pass alignment mentioned earlier by Mr. Huffman. I believe that would create both an environmental and operating disaster for this particular project, and would much prefer to see an Altamont Pass alignment, ideally a system that would include a first phase simply connecting Livermore and then going over the Tehachapi Pass to Lancaster, and that would allow us to connect both the BART system in the San Francisco Bay Area to the LA Metro link. It's less than 350 miles. We've got all existing rail right-of-way, and it could be done very cheaply, and we could then test to see if this works very well. Once we have dedicated rail, standard gauge, electrified, if it works, great, we expand the system. If it doesn't work, well, then the standard gauge rail could be used for heavy cargo, and either way we get value out of our investment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, committee. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Aaron Fukuda. I'm with the Citizens for California High-Speed Rail Accountability. I represent over 500 plus business owners, and those business owners own farms. Those are the guys that meet at the coffee shops in the morning trying to figure out if that hail's headed their way. I want to thank you committee members for allowing me to provide a little bit of clarity as far as the business plan. I've read through the business plan, and their mantra has been better, faster, and cheaper. I have to disagree with that. I kind of feel now the title should be inferior, slower, and you pay for what you get. Inferior meaning the document is really a hollow document. It makes a bunch of claims with no backup. The LAO is providing most of that information to you in their report. Slower, we really don't know whether we're going to get between the 2 points in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Transportation such as trains depends on timing. It depends on reliability. This system you're going to be running into 3 different areas, northern, central, and southern, and doing different things and coordinating. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to make in that time. And you pay for what you get. Really, they reduce the scope, you reduce the system, you reduce the service. So that's just understood. And still, I'm asking the question, where is Phase 2? Phase 2 is not addressed in the business plan. We also have a grave concern that the authority has snuck into the documents that the Amtrak service will be discontinued between Merced and Bakersfield. That was snuck into the ridership and revenue document. Like was reported earlier, you're discriminating against a certain class of society that can afford a $5 ticket and not a $38 ticket. That was never discussed with our communities, although it was snuck in by the authority under a JPA initiative that's running under another piece of legislation. That is not how we run government. I've come to realize that legislature must be stuck in a hard position. They've put a document in front of you that you really cannot 100% support. That's why there's delay tactics, trying to understand. That shouldn't be. If they had met their mandate, it should have been an easy question and this should be a done deal. It's not. So that gives me indication that your document is not valid. Lastly, we strongly urge that the legislature deny any funding by to the authority. Please realize that by denying funding to the authority, legislature is not turning its back on high-speed rail. It's simply letting the authority know that they didn't do their job. High-speed rail will always have a place in the state of California as an alternative when the team and the time is right.
Okay,
the time and team are wrong right now, and that's evident by the poorly put together business plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Dr. Glenn Parsons. I'm a resident of Kings County, and I hope to have your attention. I have graduate degrees in higher education, economics, and international finance, and an undergraduate degree in Chinese studies, which I'll come back and speak to momentarily. I see the lobbyists are out here in force today, and I often use a dollar bill as an example to a speaking point in my econ classes, because government is the only one that has the legal right to take this from me by force. And the lobbyists I hear today are asking you to take this money from me by force to give them jobs. Whereas on my farm in my county, I can spend this dollar to buy trees or to buy seed, and we don't have those people here speaking for them now. Those jobs that might be transferred are not created. They are taken from somebody else, and they are taken by force. So I am asking for you to be very, very considerate and careful in your decision making. It is not win-win. I'm not saying it's zero-sum. Government certainly has a role to play. But I live in Kings County on Excelsior Avenue, and catty corner to my piece of property is the Muscle Slough tragedy. We pick up along the road railroad spikes that are left over from that dismantled railroad that cost people's lives. Government can do good. It can also get it very wrong. Do not let lobbyists drive this. I have ridden in high-speed rail in Taiwan, and it was mentioned earlier that there's going to be 22 million people and 500 miles of track in California. There are 30 million people in Taiwan and 200 miles of track. They have generated their
need you to have a concluding sentence, please.
They generated their first operating profit, but have come nowhere near close recouping all the money that is spent, and neither will we.
Okay, thank you very much. Next.
Chairman Gordon, rest of the Assembly people, thank you for having us here. My name is Jerry Fagundes, also from Central Valley, California. What we're really talking about is Prop 1A, and does this project meet the wording so you can fund them the money? In the voter guide for Prop 1A, some of the information was the proposed system would connect the major metropolitan areas of San Francisco, Sacramento, through the Central Valley, into Los Angeles, Orange County, the Island Empire with San Bernardino, Riverside counties, and San Diego. Also, the authority estimated that in 2006 that total cost to develop, construct the entire high-speed train system of around 500 miles would be about $45 billion. Of the $9.95 billion in bond proceeds being requested, $9 billion would be spent on the high-speed rail system, and $0.95 billion would be spent to improve mass transit connecting with the new system. Phase 1 of the train project is the corridor between San Francisco Transbay Terminal and Los Angeles Union Station. This is in the voter guide. This is what we voted on. Bond funds will be appropriated by legislature after authority has submitted to the Department of Finance and legislature a detailed funding plan for each corridor or segment of a corridor before bond funds would be appropriated for that corridor or segment of a corridor. The funding plan must also be reviewed by a committee whose members include financial experts and high-speed train experts. The voter also read and relied on information presented by the LAO office 3.5 years later, seeing that none of these promises come to fruition. Rail links from Los Angeles, San Diego via the Inland Empire, are no longer found in the authority's business plan, nor are estimated costs for completing this once promised system. Costs for Phase 1 linking San Francisco to Los Angeles have risen to about $91.4 billion, which is on page 22 of their last business plan, or more than twice what voters were told it would cost to build the entire system.
I'm going to ask you to, if you would, please provide the rest of your testimony in writing to us.
Yes,
happy
sir.
to have that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next.
Mike Robeson on behalf of Caltrain. I'm here to specifically just to concur with all the statements made by Mr. Richard about the benefits of to Caltrain and electrifying the Caltrain line that are contained in the MOU with between MTC and the High Speed Rail Authority, and also wanted to acknowledge and support the committee staff's assessment on page 15 of your analysis, suggesting that an appropriation on the bookend MOUs would be an appropriate and beneficial use in this budget act as well. And thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi. Good morning. My name is Daniel Kraus with California. I'm executive director of Californians for High Speed Rail. We're here to support the new business plan and also moving forward with the project. I wanted to thank, we see this document as actually as a product not just of the High Speed Rail Authority, but as a dialogue, a statewide dialogue, especially in terms of the blended system, which was a dialogue with some of the lawmakers in this state, and we actually really appreciate the fact that that dialogue took place, because originally we were skeptical of the blended system, but we've actually been sold on the idea as a much more intelligent way to move forward given the current circumstances. So we wanted to thank all the leadership around the state in developing that plan. In terms of just as we deliberate on this issue here at the state capitol, we just want to urge that there's a balanced discussion between the risks that are identified in the LAO report and other documents that come across your desk, but we also want to make sure that as part of the dialogue that or debate about moving forward, please take a look at all the benefits as close as you can and give it the equal weight, because we feel that if you really look at the benefits, then against the risks, we see the high-speed rail project as truly the low-risk alternative for California's future compared to not moving forward. And we think the state will make the same conclusion if we talk about the benefits in a very thorough way as we do about the risks and the costs. So, and then just finally, a couple specific items on the cap and trade. I wanted to echo a statement made by somebody else about the Caltrain system is going to be and other blended early investments will reduce greenhouse gases in the short term, but also as part of that equation we need to look at freeway and airport expansions that are required. If we decide to not move forward with this project, we're going to have to immediately start building that infrastructure around the state, and whatever greenhouse gas emissions that come from those need to be included in any calculation that we have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Chris Kahn, representing the Economic Development Corporation serving Fresno County. We're in strong support of the revised business plan. We want to thank Chairman Richard and the authority for their engagement in the Central Valley and especially Fresno County. We look forward to that continuing as this hopefully moves forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Chris Ochoa, representing the city of Palo Alto today. We heard a few speakers ago from the California building trades, the gentlemen say that you're hearing a lot of no from the opponents. But the fact is the city of Palo Alto, for one, was supportive of this, unanimously supportive of high-speed rail and Prop 1A years ago. But you know, times change, and you as our elected officials know better than anyone, our economy has changed. It's changed significantly. You've made painful cuts the last couple of years, and you're going to continue to make them this year and for the foreseeable future. And this is an extra. And when times are good, extras are good. You know, you think about your personal finances, and when things are good, you can take that extra trip with the family to Hawaii, or you can buy that extra car or something. But when things aren't good, you can't do that. When your home's underwater, when you've got the credit card debt, you're having trouble paying for your kids' education, paying the health insurance, etc., you don't go to the bank and ask for a loan to buy that new Ferrari. It just doesn't happen. And you can hear, you're hearing from the supporters and the opponents alike, but I want to leave you with one quote from Chairman Richard from last month's hearing, transportation hearing in Mountain View, which he said to Senators Simidian, Lowenthal, and DeSaulnier, quote, "I don't believe we are going to be able to look you in the eye or look the public in the eye and tell them that we have any greater clarity about the funding today than we did on November 1st when we issued our draft plan." And I think that statement is telling. I don't think that exudes the kind of confidence that you need when you're handing over billions of dollars in funding for this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Mr. Chair, members, Sarah Flocks of the California Labor Federation, and I just want to start by thanking the leadership of the High-Speed Rail Authority for putting forward a plan that swiftly responded to the concerns of the legislature and local government, and to put together a plan that is workable and reasonable. And I would like to also say that high-speed rail is not an extra for the state of California. I would argue that it is the foundation, it is critical to economic development, to economic recovery and job creation in the state. This project will create hundreds of thousands of jobs and put people back to work in stable middle-class jobs. If we delay the project, not only do we lose federal funding, but we also lose the opportunity for private investment. This is a project that has the opportunity to bring private money into the state. When there was a request for expressions of interest to the private sector by the High-Speed Rail Authority a couple years ago, over 1,100 companies responded, including a number of companies that want to operate this train and build the trains, hopefully in California. And also there is the question of development around the stations. There'll be, I believe, 24 stations with the opportunity to have huge development, including high-density and transit-oriented development that the state needs for our growing population. So I support the business plan, and we would urge the appropriation of funds.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Nadia Nayak, and I'm a co-founder of CARD. My topic sentence, you made the law, so now follow it. Even if you had a blank check from the state to fund this project, you shouldn't do it today. It has some elements that are lacking, that are the beginning of a good plan, but it fails on many important points. It has no real funding. It lacks a reliable ridership study. It has bad routes. It's very risky. It'll probably require subsidies, and you don't even have a team in place to really execute on this. But you don't have a blank check, and you actually have to follow the laws of AB 3034, which were written to protect Californians from the dangers of this kind of project. But we can't change AB 3034 without going back to the voters. And so here we are 3.5 years after the vote with a plan that still violates the law. There are many violations depending on how you look at it. They can't make the 2-hour and 40-minute requirements. They may need a subsidy. The blended plan may or may not be even legal. But the one undeniable violation is their funding plan. The law requires that the authority have all of the money for the usable segment and that they must have completed their environmental review. You don't have either of those things. And the process is what it is. And so as legislators, your job is clear. You must compare the law in this plan and decide to fund or not to fund. And if it does not, then you should send them back to the drawing board to come up with something that meets the requirements that were set forth and that lays the groundwork for a good state plan. It's a shame that's taken this long and we have come this far and still the plan doesn't meet the law. In 2008, the legislature wrote in numerous stipulations, including the ultimate power, that the bond dollars could only be released with legislative appropriation. Here's your chance to use your power to make them get this right. Please protect Californians. If this doesn't meet the law, use your power accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Assembly members, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. Chairman Richard, in his statements earlier, stated that he was a member of BART when BART started and it was being built without knowing where the funding would come from. I've also heard at various meetings in the past that the interstate highway system was built without knowing where the funding was come from, which is not true either. I would like to point out that neither of these things that I have brought forward are mentioned in Prop 1A. Prop 1A doesn't care about what other project was built or where the funding came from. Prop 1A says that the funding shall be in place before you start. As far as the interstate highway system goes, the funding source was gasoline taxes. That was written into it from the beginning. I'd like to take a moment also and thank the members of the LAO. I think you folks have done a great job. I personally would have liked to seen you just chop it off at the legs and let it flounder, but I understand that there may be some, you may have some pressures other than that. But there's a concept in business, I forgot now if you want to call it economic or a financial concept, called a sunk cost. And when a project no longer makes sense, it is not doing what it's supposed to do, regardless of how many billions you put into it. There are times when it's cut the chase, take your losses, and move on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Hi, this is Kathy Hamilton. I'm with the Community Coalition on High-Speed Rail. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Richard for something. He said, let's not talk about the right-of-way because that, didn't mean to say that, but because that means that you're taking people's farms, dairies away by acquiring land that you don't know whether you're going to use. So thanks a lot for that. And Mr. Richard, if he had been involved earlier, perhaps the program would have been done differently. But personalities aside, we need to follow the law, as many speakers have said. There's a perfect storm of negativity about this project. We now have 3 federal investigations going on. Washington, D.C. based General Accounting Office, the House of Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and the Judicial Watch Organization. This is not a normal kind of investigation. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I wanted to say that no matter how long you study the plan, the difference between a plan and reality, reality and a dream is a plan, and this plan isn't it. And one moment, I wanted to tell you, there is not the money to build it, the ridership numbers to support it. The peer review group asked for an independent review of the ridership numbers, which are crucial, not only for profitability, but for greenhouse gases, as we heard. That needs to be done. And one quick word about the blended system. It is not exactly what Assemblyman Gordon, Simidian, and Eshoo recommended. They wanted a reduction in scope. There is a 4-track system still in the plan, and we do not know today if it is legal. We demand a legal ruling.
Okay, thank you very much. Next.
My name is Frank Oliveira. I'm with the Citizens for California High-Speed Rail Accountability. I come before you today to ask a simple thing. First of all, I would like to point out that I've provided a handout to you with a red map on it. There are a lot of people in the Central Valley, which is the start of this project, that oppose this project. That makes us naysayers. But reality is simply we have asked the state of California to comply with the law, to do this project right. What's happening is simply, in the new business plan, you can take AB 3034, and you can develop 14 points out of it and come up with 22 things in the business plan that do not comply. If somebody like me, who is just a plain person, can look at this and say, this doesn't work. The initial construction segment or initial operating segment is not what Proposition 1A says it should be. Where is the money to go between Bakersfield and Palmdale? Where is San Fernando in AB 3034? Where is Merced as a starting point, really, in AB 3034? So all of that said, it is time for people to start complying with the law. I ask you to not fund this project simply because it is impossible to comply with the law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
My name is Carl Freiberg. I represent myself and I think maybe 20 at least million other Californians, hopefully. President Obama's $53 billion HSR package represents about 0.3% of the gross national product. When President Eisenhower, back in 1956, proposed $25 billion, which was authorized and which President Eisenhower signed off on for the interstates, that represented 6% of the GDP. We have to increase the amount of money that government is going to fund, because traditionally federal government has put up about 80% of major capital projects. And there's always a lot of people against it. There were people against Grand Coulee Dam. There were people against Hoover Dam. And, you know, they were very costly projects. But in the end, we did them, and now we have low-cost electricity in the Pacific Northwest. We have low-cost electricity in some parts of Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada. Number 2, public safety. Call me on the time, please.
You got 25 seconds.
Okay. Between 1960 and the year 2010, over 2 million Americans were killed on our highways. Has anyone in this room lost any members of their family to highway accidents? In Japan, in that same period, 0 people have been killed on their high-speed rails. The same is true for Spain. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Tim Kremens, Operating Engineers, in full support of the business plan. I know you've heard it several times, but it bears repeating. We are in a construction industry ravaged with pockets of 40% unemployment, depression area numbers. And I'd hope you'd give the chance to the plan to go through. I think there's plenty of time to tinker with the process if you want. But again, they've been legend in what they've done to improve the plan, and I think you should continue to give them the chance to tinker with the plan to make it a better product. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave Ackerman, representing the Associated General Contractors. I echo Mr. Kremen's remarks. We're at 40% unemployment in the construction industry. You can still tinker with the plan. I think commend Chairman Richard for a substantial revision to the business plan, and the general contractors are pleased to be in support. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, my name is Stephen Bender. I'm a volunteer with Californians for High-Speed Rail, as well as a student in public administration. And I'd just like to appeal to everyone to take a look at the big picture. By the time the project is due to come online in late 2020s, there are going to be between 8 to 10 million more Californians with us, many of them highest growth in the Central Valley, where the spine is to be built. I'd also like to appeal to you to consider the environmental impact. The law mandates that greenhouse gases be reduced dramatically in the next decades, and that transportation makes up some 40% of those greenhouse gases and has been a growing proportion of total greenhouse gases, and that high-speed rail could be an integral way of mitigating that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Richard Tolmack, President of the California Rail Foundation. Thank you, Chairman and members. California Rail Foundation has been a supporter of high-speed rail since the beginning. We don't like this plan essentially because it does not deliver the promised benefits. Number one, it cannot produce greenhouse gas savings because the construction is so overly lavish on so many sections of the line that you basically can never recoup the cost of hundreds of miles of elevated structure, which they're planning here. And the greenhouse gas impact of that is huge. It happens in the decade coming where they're going to start construction. Any savings would happen decades after that. Here's the issue with greenhouse gases. If you have a service which runs an extra 150 miles that it doesn't need to run compared to airline, you cannot beat airlines enough to justify the immense greenhouse gas effects of all that elevated structure. The other thing is 220-mile operation of passenger trains does not save very much greenhouse gases generically compared to auto. It's a higher consumer than auto. It's very close to the air rates. Because of this, and because of the fact that the line, I guess they're now saying it's 490 miles, where their website still says it's 432. And you know, a lot of the greenhouse gas emission numbers that they come up with were with the old mileage. And so essentially there's problems in the math all over the place. There is a state agency right now, California Energy Commission, which is trying to cite alternative energy in the desert. And it's very interesting that in discussions in their own documents, they say this is going to take 3,000 gigawatt hours per year.
Concluding sentence, please.
Okay. In the Energy Commission's work, it's 13. And so...
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next.
Mr. Chairman and members, Michael Turner on behalf of the LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Our board supports the high-speed rail project, and we support moving forward on the project. We think the business plan, as outlined by the authority, is a significant improvement. And I'd like to thank and recognize the work of Directors Richard and Rossi in that effort. They have engaged in an extensive, thank you, and they have engaged in an extensive amount of dialogue around the state, and that has led to significant evolutions in the plan. We think the plan lays out a three-legged stool to move forward, and we think that each of those stools needs to move forward. First, the investments in the Central Valley. We support moving forward as outlined in the business plan. The plan outlines a blended corridor approach. We support that. We do have some issues with the specifics in the committee recommendation, and we can address those both with the authority and through the process. But the third leg of the stool is also the connectivity funds. We have a project that will create a direct linkage, a direct transit linkage to the high-speed rail project, and will provide direct transit access to millions of Angelinos. We think it's important to move forward on the connectivity funds with the projects that have been adopted, at least with respect to the one in Los Angeles County in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. And final person.
I had a 10-page statement I was prepared to read for Mr. Valadeo's benefit. Mark Smith on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies of California. A lot has been said. We'd like to thank the legislature and the High-Speed Rail Authority for their work on the revised plan. We continue to support the project. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That will conclude the public comment on this. I do have a letter that I will distribute to my colleagues and make available from our colleague, Assemblymember Perea, that will be entered into the record as part of the public testimony. I have a whole set of questions and some concerns I want to raise at this point, but Mr. Valadeo, questions, comments that you want to raise, and let you go first, and I'll do cleanup unless one of our colleagues come back.
Well, I do have a question. One of the speakers brought up the 2 hours and 40-minute part of the. How is that going to be addressed, especially now with the bookends and with what's going on in the Bay Area and down in the LA area?
Assemblyman Valadeo, if I might just also introduce my colleague Jim Hartnett, a member of the authority who joined us. Basically, our plan is that as the system is built out, there will be stair steps till we get there, but I just want to make it very clear, Mr. Rossi and Mr. Hartnett can chime in. There is nothing about using the existing tracks on the peninsula in Northern California that prevents us from making the 2 hours and 40 minutes. That is our plan. That is the law. That is what we are planning for, and that's how we'll operate. The express trains will go from LA Union Station to the Transbay Terminal, also known as the Transbay Transit Center in San Francisco, in 2 hours and 40 minutes. If you'd like, we can explain the differences that were in the chart that were handed out by the folks from CARD. But there are certain things that are done for planning purposes, then there are things that are done for operating purposes. And one of the speakers was right. The other reason is we need to compete with the airlines. 2 hours and 40 minutes, we will make that.
Go ahead. I'll have questions in a minute. I'll have questions in a minute.
Let me address several issues, and some by comment and some by question. One of the things that's important to me is to be assured that that we have, as we build segments of this, that we have utility. So I need to understand a little bit clearer in this first segment from Madera to Bakersfield, what utility, what additional utility we might be achieving.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I think in addition to the fact, first of all, there is utility just in the fact that there is right-of-way acquisition there, and this is an area where we would agree with LAO. This is a very fast-growing area. But in terms of operational utility, the view is that while we are continuing to build, getting ready for initial high-speed rail operations, the notion here is that we would be trying to achieve utility at every single step of the way. And almost immediately we would foresee the merging of the San Joaquin's service that comes from Oakland and also Sacramento and goes to Bakersfield onto a combination of existing tracks in Northern California and the high-speed rail tracks. Let me just make 2 quick points about this. Under federal regulation right now, whenever you have mixed freight and passenger, the passenger service is limited to 79 miles per hour unless you improve that trackway with positive train control and other grade crossing protections, in which case you can get to 90. Working with Caltrans and the Business Transportation and Housing Agency, we would be working and also using some of the connectivity funds from Prop 1A, if the committee agrees with our request, that we would make those improvements in that existing part of the corridor, and then the trains could roll right onto our tracks where, since there would not be mixed operations, they could go as fast as the locomotives could go, which would be probably 125 miles an hour. There are 1 million trips per year on that corridor right now. As I think the Vice Mayor of Hanford, when she was saying she was going to San Diego, that service right now requires a bus connection from Bakersfield to Los Angeles, then connecting onto the Surfliner. So we'd be improving that whole corridor. The only other quick point I wanted to make was that I apologize if I was not clear before. Yes, in looking at that as a matter of improved utility, because it improves the north-south movement on that corridor, there is a possibility that existing Amtrak service that stops in those Southern Valley towns, Hanford, Wasco, Corcoran, we would need to address that. And so nobody was trying to sneak anything in. It's a very direct sense that we'd be shifting that Amtrak service, and I think it's our responsibility as a state to maintain service to those communities through some alternative mechanism. And I don't have an answer for you today, but I want to assure Mr. Valadeo and others who represent those regions that we understand how important that is. But that's where we would look to the utility, Mr. Chairman, is immediate increase, improvement in it's the 5th most popular Amtrak route in the United States today, is that corridor, and we could improve the service by probably about an hour as we are continuing to build and get ready for full high-speed rail operation.
And to what extent does having the some kind of an MOU or relationship with the Northern California Unified Service help with that, and where are you in that process?
Well, first I want to say that much of the idea for this emanated from that group, from Stacy Mortensen and people running the ACE train service. This was really, if you look at the comments on our draft business plan, this is where many of these ideas came from. I'm not precisely sure where we are. I know we're in discussions and negotiations with them. I don't know if Mr. Morales is here. But we can keep the committee advised on this. It is important because basically those operators are currently looking at whether or not they want to propose to take that service that's currently run by Caltrans and move it into some kind of joint powers authority. So we're working very closely with them on that. Okay. And Mr. Chairman, I'll get you a more precise answer about when we expect to have that before our board.
Okay. I guess a couple other points and questions. One is that I think that there's been some concerns raised about the staffing at the authority, and in particular having a management team in place. I certainly appreciate that you've done a great job as CEO, and Mr. Rossi, you've done a great job as CFO. But I know that at some point there needs to be some hiring, and I think many of us would have a greater sense of confidence knowing who's going to be on the long-term basis managing this. And where are we in that process?
First of all, Mr. Chairman, you'll be happy to know that since we were both appointed by Governor Brown, we're basically doing that for peanuts. So taxpayers are getting great value at the moment. But
I would argue that.
Fair enough.
Point taken, Mr. Valadeo. Mr. Chairman and other members, this is a very serious concern, and let me just tell you where we are on this quickly, which is that the three of us that you see here, along with our colleagues, have been very concerned about this issue. There is no question that the authority is understaffed. Let me say very quickly for the record, the legislature has provided more than adequate staffing slots for the authority. They have not been filled. This is not your fault. This is our fault. And by the way, Department of Finance has approved those staffing slots as well. So the responsibility for the understaffing rests squarely at the High-Speed Rail Authority and no place else. We've taken that on. Now that the business plan has been produced and is in front of you, we're turning our attention. We are in final stages of discussion and negotiation on a number of very key top-level positions. We're in a search environment for a CEO to replace Mr. Van Ark. And so it's our expectation that in the very near future, we should be coming back to you with a leadership team at the High-Speed Rail Authority that fills out a number of the critical positions. In the meantime, we also have a number of mid-level positions, and here we, again, already working with Caltrans, have been working very closely. I want to thank the director of Caltrans, Mr. Doherty. He and his team have helped us. We've identified slots with people, very capable people in Caltrans that we can move into a lot of those mid-level positions, contract management, other specialists, and so forth. It is an area of great concern, Mr. Chairman. We understand you're raising it, and I believe literally over the course of the next couple of weeks, we should be able to come back to you and point to a leadership team that can accomplish this project.
Thank you. Question for Finance. The governor is suggesting here that we would allocate almost $6 billion, and yet that's not all needed next year. Why are we getting a request for multi-year funding rather than taking this a year at a time?
Mr. Chair, Karen Finn with the Department of Finance, members, and thank you. Before I get into that, I also want to just kind of add a couple other points that were made as kind of an intro here. Hopefully if you've read the very detailed Proposition 1A Bond Act, you can appreciate the requirements in the Department of Finance before we even submitted these requests to you. So I hope you can appreciate all the work that we've done and thank the board for helping us get to the place that we have now submitted these requests. Second of all, so now the request for the $6 billion is very consistent with other capital projects that you, the legislature, have appropriated over the years. The full funding to get a particular segment called the iOS completed. The authority will be going out over the next year with multiple requests for huge contracts that the construction community is putting together right now for the first award in December of later this year. There needs to be some certainty that the whole project will be available to be constructed over the next few years. If we start breaking up into small pieces, these contractors will be ordering materials, staffing up. They need some assurances that the whole funding will be there, and it provides efficiency instead of multiple appropriations over the next few years to be monitoring just based on a cash flow versus a project. So we just would confirm that it's efficient, and then most importantly, we understand that the authority has had some discussions with the Federal Railroad Association, Railroad Authority, and they have made it quite clear that they expect the state to make its full commitment to the $3 billion of federal funds that they've put up.
Mr. Belvin, if you have a follow-up.
No, I just really appreciate the comments because we're looking for the same thing. We have no assurances that there is money for any of these projects for people to order any of these materials, and I think that's been our argument all along. We're relying on AB 32 money, which I think even the authors agreed back in 06, what was it, in 2010, that Pavley introduced a bill to try to get to make it a revenue source because she knew when she wrote the bill originally in 06 that it wasn't supposed to be a revenue source. I think there's also a letter on the record from, is it Nunez, the main author, that said the same thing, that this wasn't intended to be a revenue source. The feds have already come in and said that this isn't a project there is a priority for them. So I agree wholeheartedly. For these contractors to start ordering materials and start hiring people, we need some security on the revenue source, and we have not seen that yet. So there's really no reason for us to approve the project to go forward. So thank you for those comments.
Sure, and just to be clear, the part that we're talking about is the $6 billion that Mr. Richards already talked to you about, the utility of it, that even if the rest of it didn't get funded, there is some utility in this. The next phase, we will be once all that funding is identified, that will be a subsequent request in the next couple of years.
Let me direct questions a couple other areas. Been some discussion today about the bookends, north and south, and one of the issues that was raised is L.A. or Anaheim. And so I know in the business plan is revised, Anaheim was not included, but I believe that you've had some recent discussions at the authority about perhaps re-examining that. Can you give us an update?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The adopted business plan does indicate that we would get all the way to Anaheim with what was called a one-seat or one-ticket ride from San Francisco. So Anaheim is now included in the plan. We're going to have to work out some of the details about precisely how we do that in the most cost-effective way. But basically what happened was, as we were looking at ways to save money, it was really our colleagues in Southern California who said, well, they were comfortable with the notion of having a transfer at Union Station and using the very effective Metrolink connection down to Anaheim. And a full build-out there was going to cost $6 billion. So that looked like an area where cost-effectively we could reduce that. I think what was interesting there is that over the last couple of years there have been some voices out of Orange County that have basically said, no, we don't want high-speed rail, had problems with the business plan and so forth. And yet, at the moment when it looked like perhaps Anaheim was going to be relegated to a transfer service, civic and business leaders of that community came to us and said, no, this is really important to us. And so we're finding a way to make it work. I think we can follow the model of what we're doing in Northern California, put up some electrification, and figure out how to blend the service on the existing tracks for substantially less than that $6 billion. It's down the road a ways. We're looking at 2028. But basically what we're saying is when we open to Los Angeles Union Station, we will also be opening to Anaheim.
I guess, and I don't know whether this is a question for you or for finance, but I'm troubled by the fact that we're not moving forward with the bookends. I think there's great utility in the activities that are proposed in these various MOUs in Southern California and in the San Francisco Peninsula region. And so why are we not requesting funding? Why are we not moving forward? Because it appears that there's a, I think, potential promise there, but no delivery in the immediate future.
I'm happy to take the first swing unless I always defer to finance if they want to go first.
Mr. Chair, Matt Robinson with Department of Finance. We have not proposed a funding request for the $1.1 billion portion of Prop 1A funding that's going to be used on the bookends for two simple reasons. One, the program of projects down in LA that's going to result in the construction of a blended system is not ready yet. And then in Northern California, the environmental completion for the electrification of the Caltrain corridor is also underway in May. As I understand it, need to be revisited now that the blended approach is the strategy going forward on that corridor segment.
Yes, I, for one, would be far more comfortable in making some approvals knowing that we were making greater progress in those regions. And specifically to a very local issue on the San Francisco Peninsula, it remains troubling to many of us the fact that we've got a programmatic EIR that talks about 4 tracks, and yet I know that from all of our discussions, Mr. Richard, that there's a commitment that the business plan talks about a blended system on the peninsula that would not require 4 tracks. I, for one, am going to need some assurance, and whether we do that because you're able to withdraw or make some change to the programmatic EIR, or whether we have very specific language in legislation, either through trailer bill language, possibly, that clarifies very, very clearly that we're not talking about 4 tracks on the peninsula.
If I might just make one quick comment and then turn it over to our resident expert on the blended system, Mr. Hartnett. First, I just wanted to say that we very much look forward to the Caltrain electrification. We think that that is a great project and that we will benefit from it. And one of the things I want to commend both the Caltrain leadership and also Steve Heminger and his team at MTC is that they've actually come to us with a funding plan that shows the discrete areas where they will match the Prop 1A money. So that is a very good step, and I think it's very good. And as Finance pointed out, if we can help work with them to get them through the environmental process, then I think that project will really move forward. So it's an exciting project, and they've thought a lot about it in the region, and it's a very real project for us. And Mr. Hartnett really knows these issues. We are committed to doing this right on the peninsula. And Jim, do you want to address this?
Welcome, Mr. Hartnett.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with you. The programmatic ER does refer to the blended system. It is subject to further work at our board meeting coming up, in fact, tomorrow. But at the time that the authority can restart the project ER study for the peninsula, that would be the place in which the blended approach would, in my view, be defined as the project, and hence the project level EIR would study that, and that would be then, based upon that document, that which could be built. Further, as Mr. Richard indicated, the MOU with MTC refers only to the blended system as being part of the plan. And as you know, the blended has been fully braced in the business plan. So I think those are the things that we can do that are within our control, I think, in order to focus on the blended. And whether or not the legislature is of a mind to also include something that would be within its discretion, I think.
If I might just add, Mr. Chairman, we're aware of the concern, not just your concern, but we recognize that there is this disconnect between what's in our existing programmatic EIR and what the community is hearing us say about our commitment to the blended approach. And a lot of that is just the vagaries of the CEQA process. I would just share my colleagues' notion that we would work with you in this committee so that you could have a greater sense of comfort about that issue as we move forward. And one last thing, Mr. Morales handed me a note just to make the point that in the budget request from the administration is also money for the connectivity dollars. Some portion of that does in fact go to the bookends, both to contribute to Caltrain electrification as well as BART and VTA. So even before we get to the issue of the MOU, this budget request before you does have some very important resources for those systems.
Are there other changes proposed relative to the connectivity funds? And I also am aware that I think in the past we've legislatures put some money aside for connectivity, and the governor's line item vetoed that. In the Department of Finance, tell me whether the governor's thinking differently, or maybe you don't know what's in his head. But.
Yeah, so just to clarify the context, the vetoes in the previous years were directly related to the fact that the projects that were identified by the California Transportation Commission do not appear to have a clear nexus to the high-speed rail project itself. And so we believe programmatically that these connectivity projects do need to have a strong strategic relationship to the high-speed rail project and not just be projects that kind of stand alone in isolation. So what this proposal before the administration is proposing for the $812 million, there's language in there that establishes a process for the California Transportation Commission to coordinate with the authority on these projects, as well as establishes a process to ensure that both the administration and the legislature have sufficient oversight to ensure that the ultimate projects that get funded directly relate to the high-speed rail project.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to, for my colleagues on the committee who may have staff listening in, we're going to be drawing this to a close very shortly. So if any of my colleagues who are not present in the room have questions or comments, they'll need to return fairly quickly. Let me get into one kind of final area from my perspective that's important, and that is, I think that as we move forward, we need to be looking at a report back mechanism to the legislature. And I'm particularly concerned that should there be some agreement to approve funding on a multi-year basis, as has been requested, that we be guaranteed that we get some kind of regular feedback on progress, so that we can, I mean, as has been said, this is probably one of the largest proposed infrastructure projects in several generations. And I think the legislature is going to need to be assured in many ways that we're making the right steps, that the right investments are being made, and that we're making progress. So I encourage the authority and the administration to work with us to come up with some report back mechanisms, some vehicles for communicating kind of what the progress is.
Yes, that's perfectly reasonable.
We agree with that, Mr. Chairman. We will certainly cooperate with you and Finance to come up with the appropriate oversight reports.
Okay. Let me ask the LAO if they have any closing comments they want to make before we bring this to a close.
First of all, we're happy to work with you and Department of Finance and the High Speed Rail Authority, and particularly Dan Richard, who's reached out to us to identify some of those report back requirements as well as other ways to improve governance. And I think that's it for now. Do you have anything to add, Farrah?
Okay. Any final comments from Finance?
No, thank you.
Mr. Richard, any final comment?
I just want to thank you for considering our request, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. As I said at the outset, we are not anticipating taking any action on this item or on the budget change proposals for high-speed rail. Those are presented in the staff report, and we're not going to take further comment on them today. But I do anticipate, based on our budget schedule, that we will be having some decisions here in this committee and in the full budget committee in the Assembly prior to the adoption of the June budget. That is certainly the schedule that we normally follow and operate under. And with that, I want to thank those who have been here today, particularly those in the audience. We're going to give you a little lunch break before you all head over to the Senate side of the House, where this afternoon our colleagues in the Senate will be holding a hearing on the same issue. So we'll try to give everybody a good break before you have to do this all over again. And with that, we will adjourn for today.